For most of my career, I thought gut health was simple. Eat your fiber, take a probiotic, maybe throw in some yogurt, and your gut would be fine. I was wrong. Because while most people are focused on what to add to their diet, almost nobody is paying attention to what they need to remove. And some of the foods you eat every single day, foods that are marketed as healthy, diet-friendly, or heart-smart, are chemically dissolving the only barrier that stands between your bloodstream and the trillions of bacteria living inside your intestine. That barrier is one cell thick, one single layer of cells, and when it breaks down, it doesn't just cause bloating, it opens the door to systemic inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, and a cascade of symptoms that most doctors will never trace back to your gut. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 common everyday foods that are scientifically proven to damage your gut lining. I'll explain the exact mechanisms step by step so you understand not just what to avoid, but why. And by the end, you'll be able to identify these ingredients on any food label within seconds. I'm a physician who works with patients every day, patients whose blood work comes back normal, whose scans look clean, but who still can't shake the fatigue, the brain fog, the bloating, the skin problems that never quite resolve. And in case after case, when I finally looked closely at what they were actually eating, not just how much, but which specific ingredients, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Before we get into the 5 foods, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Sarah. She's 41. She's a school teacher in Denver, and on paper, she does everything right. Every morning, Sarah starts her day with a cup of diet yogurt and a scoop of protein granola. Mid-morning, she grabs a protein bar. Lunch is usually a salad with a store-bought low-calorie dressing. She drinks diet soda throughout the day because she's watching her sugar intake. And she cooks dinner at home using soybean oil because the label says it's heart healthy. Sarah has been doing this for 3 years, and for 3 years, she's had chronic bloating that starts around noon and doesn't go away until she falls asleep. She gets migraines 2 or 3 times a month. She describes a mental fog that makes her feel like she's thinking through wet cotton. Her doctor ran a full panel. Everything came back normal. Keep Sarah in mind because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why her body is fighting her despite everything she thinks she's doing right. Let's start with a food that everyone knows is bad, but almost nobody understands why it's bad for your gut specifically: refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup. Most people think sugar is harmful because of calories, because of weight gain, because of diabetes, and yes, those are real concerns. But the damage sugar does to your gut lining is a completely separate problem, and it starts long before you gain a single pound. Here is what happens when a large amount of glucose hits your small intestine. The glucose activates a transporter on the surface of your intestinal cells called GLUT2. GLUT2 doesn't just move sugar into the cell, it triggers a signaling cascade that reprograms the DNA expression of those epithelial cells. The cells begin to downregulate the proteins that hold them together, specifically 2 proteins called Zo1 and a gluten. These proteins are the bolts in the tight junctions that seal the gaps between your intestinal cells. When their production drops, those junctions loosen, the gaps between cells widen, and suddenly, molecules that were never supposed to cross that barrier, bacterial toxins, undigested food particles, lipopolysaccharides, begin leaking into your bloodstream. Basically, sugar doesn't just feed bad bacteria, it literally reprograms the cells of your gut wall to open the gates. A study published in Science demonstrated this mechanism in both mice and humans. The researchers showed that elevated blood glucose drives intestinal barrier permeability through GLUT2-dependent transcriptional reprogramming. And in the human arm of the study, they found a direct correlation between glycated hemoglobin levels, a marker of long-term blood sugar, and the amount of microbial products circulating in the bloodstream. And what surprised me was not the mechanism itself, it was the fact that these changes happened independently of body weight. A separate mouse study showed that a high-sugar diet induced metabolic endotoxemia, meaning bacterial toxins leaking into the blood, even when the animals didn't gain weight. Their inflammation markers went up, their liver started accumulating fat, but the scale didn't move. And it's not just your gut lining. The same mechanism, sugar-driven barrier breakdown leading to endotoxemia, is now linked to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, and even cognitive decline. Your gut barrier is the upstream domino. When it falls, everything downstream follows. So what does this mean practically? Check the labels on the foods you eat most frequently. Look for added sugars. The World Health Organization recommends no more than 25 grams of added sugar per day. One standard protein bar often contains 15 to 20 grams. One flavored yogurt can contain 12 to 18. One bottle of sweetened iced tea can contain 35. You can hit double the recommended limit before lunch without eating anything that feels like dessert. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the logical next thought is, okay, I'll switch to artificial sweeteners. 0 sugar, 0 calories, problem solved. Except it's not. Artificial sweeteners, sucralose, saccharin, aspartame, acesulfame, potassium, were assumed to be metabolically inert for decades. The idea was simple. Your body can't break them down, so they pass through without doing anything. That idea was wrong. Your body may not break them down, but your gut bacteria can interact with them, and they do. In 2022, a research team at the Weizmann Institute of Science published one of the most rigorous studies on artificial sweeteners ever conducted. It was published in Cell, one of the most prestigious journals in biology. They screened over 1,300 people and selected 120 who had never consumed artificial sweeteners. They randomized them into 6 groups, 4 sweetener groups receiving saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, or stevia at doses below the FDA's acceptable daily intake, plus 2 control groups. The results were striking. Every single sweetener altered the composition and function of the gut microbiome. But saccharin and sucralose went further. They significantly impaired the participants' glycemic responses in just 2 weeks. And here's the part that sealed it. The researchers took stool samples from the participants who had the worst glycemic responses, the top responders, and transplanted their microbiomes into germ-free mice. Mice that had never been exposed to sweeteners. Those mice developed the same glycemic impairment as the human donors. That's causation, not correlation. The microbiome changes caused by sweeteners were sufficient to reproduce metabolic dysfunction in a completely different organism. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect the next finding. A study from Cedars-Sinai published in iScience looked at something nobody had looked at before, the microbiome of the small intestine. Most gut studies analyze stool, which reflects the large intestine, but the small intestine is where most nutrient absorption happens, and in people who regularly consumed non-aspartame sweeteners, bacterial diversity in the duodenum was significantly reduced. Inflammatory markers in their blood were altered. Basically, the damage is happening further upstream than anyone thought, in the part of your gut that matters most for absorbing nutrients. And it's not just your gut. If sweeteners impair your glycemic response through the microbiome, that creates a paradox most people don't realize. The very products designed to prevent diabetes may, through their effect on gut bacteria, be contributing to insulin resistance. The diet soda you drink to avoid sugar may be doing something worse than sugar itself. Here's a practical test. For 2 weeks, eliminate all artificially sweetened products. Diet sodas, sugar-free gum, 0-calorie flavored water, protein bars with sucralose. Replace them with plain water, sparkling water with lemon, or unsweetened tea. Track your bloating, your energy, your mental clarity. 2 weeks. That's the same time frame the Suez study used. Give your microbiome a chance to tell you something your lab work won't. This brings us to the third food on our list, and this one is the most invisible: emulsifiers. If you've never heard that word before, you're not alone, but you've consumed emulsifiers today, almost certainly. They are in virtually every processed food you buy. Ice cream, salad dressing, non-dairy milk, bread, protein bars, yogurt, sauces, baked goods, chocolate. They're the reason that peanut butter stays smooth instead of separating, the reason that ice cream feels creamy instead of icy, the reason that dressing stays blended instead of splitting into oil and vinegar. The most common ones are carboxymethylcellulose, also called CMC or cellulose gum, polysorbate 80, carrageenan, and mono and diglycerides. These are synthetic surfactants. They work by reducing the surface tension between oil and water, and they do the exact same thing to the mucus layer that protects your gut. Here is the mechanism. Your intestinal wall is coated by a thick layer of mucus produced by goblet cells. This mucus layer is your first line of defense. It keeps bacteria physically separated from your epithelial cells. When an emulsifier enters your gut, it interacts with this mucus the same way dish soap interacts with grease on a pan. It thins the mucus layer. It degrades it. The distance between your gut bacteria and your intestinal wall shrinks. Bacteria that normally float in the outer mucus layer begin to encroach on the inner layer, the sterile zone that is supposed to keep them away from your cells. Your immune system detects the proximity. It launches an inflammatory response. Lipopolysaccharide and flagellin levels rise in the bloodstream. A state of chronic, low-grade inflammation sets in. Basically, emulsifiers strip your gut's protective coating and allow bacteria to touch the one surface they were never supposed to reach. The landmark study on this was published in Nature in 2015. Researchers gave mice carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80 in their drinking water for 12 weeks. The mice developed low-grade intestinal inflammation, altered microbiome composition, and metabolic syndrome. A follow-up study tested 20 different commonly used emulsifiers on human microbiota in a bioreactor model. The results were consistent. Most emulsifiers, though not all, altered bacterial composition and increased pro-inflammatory molecules. And now the human data is starting to arrive. The French Nutrinet Santé cohort, one of the largest prospective nutrition studies in the world, published 2 major papers. One in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology in 2024, linking emulsifier consumption to increased risk of type 2 diabetes. Another in PLOS Medicine the same year, linking it to increased cancer risk, overall cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer. What I found striking was an additional human experiment. Researchers compared high emulsifier and low emulsifier diets in healthy people. Under normal conditions, the high emulsifier diet actually improved barrier function slightly. But when the participants were put under acute stress, which was induced with a stress hormone injection, the high emulsifier diet caused a significant spike in intestinal permeability. The low emulsifier diet protected against it. Think about that. The emulsifiers were fine when life was calm. But the moment stress hit, the kind of stress most people experience every single day, the gut became leaky. And the emulsifiers were the deciding factor. And it's not just your gut wall. Emulsifier-driven chronic inflammation is now being investigated as a contributing factor to metabolic syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, and colorectal cancer. The global emulsifier market is projected to nearly double from about $9 billion to over $17 billion by 2034. These chemicals are not going away. The only defense is awareness. This is where Sarah's story starts to make sense. Remember her morning routine? The diet yogurt she eats every day contains carboxymethylcellulose for texture. The protein bar has polysorbate 80 and mono and diglycerides. The salad dressing has carrageenan. The diet cola she drinks all day contains sucralose and acesulfame potassium. And the soybean oil she cooks with every night? Well, that's our next point. Sarah is consuming all 5 gut-destroying categories before dinner even starts. And none of these ingredients appeared on any standard medical test. Let's talk about that cooking oil. Vegetable and seed oils, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, safflower oil are the most consumed cooking fats in the Western world. Soybean oil alone is the #1 edible oil in the United States. These oils are recommended as heart-healthy alternatives to saturated fats. They are in every restaurant kitchen, every fast food fryer, and most home pantries. But there is a problem, and it's rooted in chemistry. These oils are extremely high in an omega-6 fatty acid called linoleic acid. Now, linoleic acid is essential. Your body needs it. Your brain cell membranes require it. You cannot make it yourself. It has to come from food. But the amount matters enormously. 100 years ago, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in the human diet was roughly 4:1 or lower. Today, in the average Western diet, that ratio is approximately 20:1. Some estimates put it even higher. That shift happened almost entirely because of the explosion in seed oil consumption starting in the 1970s. Here's what happens when your omega-6 intake overwhelms your omega-3 intake. Excess linoleic acid gets oxidized, especially when heated during cooking. Oxidized linoleic acid activates a molecule called NF-kappa B. NF-kappa B is sometimes called the master switch of inflammation. Once activated, it ramps up production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, TNF-alpha, interleukin-6, interleukin-1 beta. These cytokines attack the tight junction proteins holding your intestinal cells together. The gut barrier becomes porous. At the same time, the microbial landscape shifts. Beneficial species like Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus decline, while pathogenic strains like adherent invasive E. coli flourish. Basically, excess seed oils flip the inflammatory switch in your gut, dissolve the glue between your intestinal cells, and feed the bacteria you don't want. Researchers at the University of California, Riverside published a study in 2023 that examined mice fed a diet high in soybean oil for 24 weeks. The animals showed a significant decrease in beneficial gut bacteria, a rise in pathogenic E. coli, and increased susceptibility to colitis. The lead researcher noted that linoleic acid directly makes the intestinal epithelial barrier porous. Now, I want to be fair here. This is a more controversial area than the previous three. Researchers at Johns Hopkins published a review in early 2026 pointing out that many of the concerning associations are confounded by the fact that seed oils are most commonly consumed in ultra-processed foods, which are problematic for many reasons beyond just the oil. They argue that seed oils in the context of a whole food diet may not be harmful. That's a valid point. And the recommendation is not to eliminate all omega-6 from your diet. That would be both impossible and unhealthy. The recommendation is to rebalance. Cook with olive oil, avocado oil, or coconut oil. Eat fatty fish 2 to 3 times a week. Add flax seeds and walnuts. Reduce your consumption of fried foods and ultra-processed snacks that are loaded with soybean or sunflower oil. Read the ingredient list on every packaged food. You'll be surprised how often these oils appear. Now we've covered 4 foods: sugar, sweeteners, emulsifiers, seed oils, each one with a specific documented mechanism of harm to the gut barrier. But the 5th one is the one that surprises most people, because it's been called the staff of life. It's been a staple of human civilization for 10,000 years, and most people eat it multiple times every single day without a second thought. I'm talking about modern wheat. Specifically, the protein in wheat called gluten and its component, gliadin. Now, before you stop watching, this is not about celiac disease. Celiac disease affects roughly 1% of the population. This is about the other 99%, because here is what the research shows. Gliadin, the toxic fraction of gluten, triggers a very specific molecular cascade in the intestinal lining of every single human being. Not just celiac patients, everyone. Follow the mechanism. Gliadin arrives at the surface of your intestinal epithelial cells. It binds to a receptor called CXCR3, a chemokine receptor that sits on the outer membrane of those cells. The binding activates an adapter protein called MyD88. MyD88 triggers the release of a protein called zonulin into the intestinal lumen. Zonulin then binds to the epidermal growth factor receptor on the epithelial cell. This activates an enzyme called PKC-alpha. PKC-alpha phosphorylates target proteins including ZO1 and myosin. The cytoskeleton of the cell rearranges. The tight junction proteins are physically displaced. The junction opens. Basically, gluten sends a specific chemical signal that tells your intestinal cells to unlock the gates. This was discovered by Alessio Fasano and his team, the same researcher who discovered zonulin itself in 2000. His team at the University of Maryland and later Massachusetts General Hospital has published over 2 decades of research on this pathway. It is one of the most thoroughly characterized mechanisms in gastroenterology. And here's what most people don't realize. In non-celiac individuals, the zonulin release is limited and transient. The gates open briefly, then close again. In celiac patients, the release is sustained and exaggerated. The gates stay open. But what happens when you eat wheat 3 times a day? Bread at breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, pasta at dinner. If the gates keep opening every few hours, the question becomes, do they ever fully close? A study published in Nutrients in 2015 tested intestinal biopsies from 4 groups: active celiac patients in remission, patients with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and healthy controls. When exposed to gliadin, both active celiac patients and non-celiac gluten sensitive patients showed a significant increase in intestinal permeability. The non-celiac gluten sensitive group showed permeability changes comparable to active celiac disease. And there's a genetic layer to this. Roughly 80% of humans carry the haptoglobin 2 gene variant, HP2. Only people with this variant produce active zonulin. So 4 out of 5 people on the planet have the genetic machinery to respond to gluten with increased gut permeability. And it's not just your gut. Elevated zonulin levels have been found in obesity, type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and even autism, all conditions associated with increased intestinal permeability. The gut barrier is a common thread. Now, let me be clear about what I am and what I am not saying. I am not saying everyone needs to go gluten-free. For many people, the transient opening caused by moderate gluten consumption may be well within what the body can handle. But if you have unexplained symptoms, chronic fatigue, joint pain, skin issues, brain fog, digestive problems that don't resolve, a 3-week gluten elimination trial is one of the simplest and most informative experiments you can run on yourself. There's also an alternative that many people overlook. Traditional sourdough bread, made with a long fermentation of 24 hours or more, uses lactobacilli that partially break down gliadin peptides before you even eat it. The zonulin triggering fragments are reduced. It's not zero gluten, but it's meaningfully less of the specific protein that opens your tight junctions. Let's bring Sarah's story to a close. When we mapped out everything Sarah was eating, the pattern was striking. Every single meal contained at least 2 of the 5 gut-destroying ingredients. Her morning yogurt, CMC plus sucralose. Her granola, added sugars plus soybean oil. Her protein bar, polysorbate 80, mono and diglycerides, sucralose, and wheat gluten. Her diet cola, sucralose and acesulfame K. Her dinner cooked in soybean oil. Her evening toast, modern wheat. Her gut lining was being hit from every direction at every meal every single day, and none of it showed up on a blood test. When Sarah eliminated these 5 categories, not all at once, but systematically over 4 weeks, the bloating disappeared within 10 days. The migraines dropped from 3 per month to 1 in 3 months. The brain fog lifted within 4 weeks. She described it as someone turning on a light in a room she didn't realize had been dark. Her gut was finally getting a chance to do what it was designed to do: heal. And here's the remarkable thing about your gut. Your intestinal lining is the fastest regenerating tissue in the human body. Every 3 to 5 days, the entire epithelium replaces itself. Your body produces roughly 200 grams of new intestinal cells every single day. That's almost half a pound of fresh tissue. Brand new barrier cells generated from stem cells at the base of your intestinal crypts, migrating upward, differentiating into the specialized cells that absorb nutrients, secrete mucus, and defend against pathogens. Your gut wants to heal. It's trying to heal right now. The only question is whether you're going to keep attacking it faster than it can rebuild. And it's not just your gut wall. 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter most people associate with mood and happiness, is produced in your gut, not in your brain, in your gut, by enterochromaffin cells whose function depends on a healthy microbiome. When your gut bacteria are disrupted by the 5 ingredients we just discussed, serotonin production is affected, dopamine precursors are affected, GABA synthesis is affected. Your gut is not just a digestive organ, it is a neurochemical factory, and when the factory is damaged, you feel it in your mood, your sleep, your focus, and your motivation long before you feel it in your stomach. So let me bring this together. Your gut lining is not a passive wall. It is a living, intelligent, actively regenerating barrier that stands between your internal world and the external chaos of everything you swallow. And 5 categories of ingredients: refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, excess omega-6 seed oils, and modern wheat gluten are attacking that barrier through 5 different but equally damaging mechanisms. Here is what you can do today, right now. Go to your kitchen, pick up 3 packaged foods, turn them over, read the ingredient list. Look for these words: high fructose corn syrup, sucralose, acesulfame potassium, aspartame, carboxymethyl cellulose, cellulose gum, polysorbate 80, carrageenan, mono and diglycerides, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil. Count how many of those ingredients appear across just 3 products. The number will surprise you. The research shows that your gut microbiome begins to shift within days of dietary changes. In the Suez study, measurable changes in microbial composition occurred within 2 weeks. Your gut is not a slow-moving ship. It is remarkably responsive, but it needs a signal from you. It needs you to stop the assault so it can start the repair. Every day you wait is another day your intestinal stem cells are fighting a battle they can't win, generating new barrier cells that get destroyed before they can mature. But the moment you remove the chemical stressors, those same stem cells get the space to rebuild. The mucus layer thickens, the tight junctions tighten, the bacterial diversity recovers, and the inflammation that's been driving your fatigue, your fog, your pain, it begins to quiet. You have more control over this than you think, and now you know exactly where to start. I'd like to know, check your kitchen today and tell me in the comments, how many of these 5 ingredients did you find? I read every comment. And if this video helped you understand something about your body that you didn't know before, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because most people are still eating these foods 3 times a day and wondering why they can't feel better. Your gut is listening. The question is, what are you feeding it?